Good morning, everyone. I want to go ahead and be doing some preliminary business as people are coming in from church, and certainly welcome all those folks who are streaming and making sure that we're starting relatively on time so they don't wonder what's going on and turn us off. So I first would want to bring to your attention a stack of really stirring documents that are for yours, for some contributions. One, the story of Father Roy Bourgeois, My Journey from Silence to Solidarity. Some very important videos, one having to do with shutting down the School of the Americas, which is one of the issues before us today, and also a stirring and inspiring video, Pink Smoke Over the Vatican, which is another issue for us this morning in terms of the ordination of women to the priesthood in the Roman Catholic Church. And also the wonderful Addicted to War booklet, which really details our addiction to the military-industrial complex and the fact that we Americans are really involved in ongoing war to the benefit of some very, very, very wealthy people. Nobody ever wins except the people who are making the arms. And this is a wonderful, detailed volume. So I recommend all of this. But let me now, I think Roy himself will talk about his websites. Roy Bourgeois is a friend of this parish and is a friend of this Rector's Forum podium. We've had him here many times, and every time he converts, he transforms, and he inspires, simply from telling the story of his life and what concerns he has. Just a quick overview. He has been a Roman Catholic priest since 1972 and is best known for his work with the School of the Americas Watch, a nonviolent organization that exposes the U.S.-based school, once called the School of Americas, and its role in training Latin American soldiers in repressive tactics and deploying them throughout the region. He founded the School of the Americas Watch in 1990 after witnessing the killings of thousands of Central Americans in the 1980s. He joined the Marinol Society, an American Catholic organization, and traveled to Bolivia, and where he was ordered to leave the country after speaking out against the oppressive government of General Hugo Banzer Suarez. He has been imprisoned many times. He knows about self-offering and self-sacrifice. In 2012, he traveled to Ecuador and Nicaragua, where he met with President Correa and President Ortega, who announced during their respective meetings with Father Roy that Ecuador and Nicaragua will no longer send soldiers or police to be trained at the School of the Americas. He is an outspoken proponent of women's ordination, saying there will never be justice in the Catholic Church unless women are allowed to be ordained. Who are we to say that a woman's call to priesthood isn't valid? God initiates the call to priesthood, and like racism, sexism is a sin. And for that, he has suffered mightily. And I am absolutely grateful to God for the walking grace who is Roy Bourgeois, our friend and our inspirer. Will you please warmly welcome Roy Bourgeois?
Thank you, Ed. It's, again, a great blessing, a joy to be with you. I can only share with you once again, experiences and people in my life who have challenged me, who have awakened me to issues of justice and peace and equality. And I don't know what can be more important than that struggle for justice and equality. But I must confess, I am among the many It took a while to get on that road, that struggle. Growing up in a small town in Louisiana, we did not question our church's teachings or our country's foreign policy. That great prophet Isaiah of the Hebrew Scriptures said it so well. They will take evil and they will call it good. They will take the lie and call it truth. And I bought into that lie of Vietnam, among other lies. But when I left college, I joined the military, and in my 4th year, thinking of making the military a career, I went off to Vietnam believing what our government was saying. Our cause was noble. We were going to be the liberators. Same language we heard in reference to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I, like so many, went off to that country we knew nothing about, Vietnam, and began to realize while there that we were indeed not the liberators but the invaders. But it was the suffering, the death of the Vietnamese people, especially children at this nearby orphanage, that awakened something in me. They became my teachers, my conscience. They reminded me that our loving God did not make us for war. We do have a conscience and a heart, hopefully with compassion. And we cannot go about the business of killing and war and go on with our lives as before. Not possible. That's why we read so much about PTSD, suicides, violence, veterans come back home. I came back from Vietnam. It was in Vietnam that I felt this call to be a peacemaker, a Catholic priest, and talked to this Army chaplain about what to do with that, and he recommended the Marino community working in 25 countries around the world, serving the poorest of the poor. Sounded great. It gave me some hope, which I had lost in Vietnam. It brought back some joy in my life. I came back from Vietnam into the seminary, but later, during those years, I had to go back to Vietnam to apologize for what we did. I also returned to the Pentagon and returned this Purple Heart that I was given. I wanted to, sort of as we often want to do, cleanse ourselves of things we've done wrong in our lives. But as we've learned, we can't change the past, no matter how hard we try. But we can change ourselves for the future. And Gandhi says it so well. Let us try to be that change that we want to see in the world. I was ordained a Catholic priest in 1972 and went off to Bolivia. That became my home, this slum on the outskirts of La Paz, for the next 5 years. And it was here that I was introduced to U.S. foreign policy 101. Our country, it saddened me to see our country there supporting a brutal dictator, General Banzer, one of the many in the region. Nearby was General Pinochet in Chile, the generals in Argentina, the thugs in Central America. We were on the wrong side, supporting militaries at war with their people. It was here that the poor really introduced to me their struggle for liberation, for justice, and their theology, a theology of liberation that gives them hope, that empowers them to speak and not to get into this colonial theology that so many of us, myself included, were taught. To accept your lot in life as God's will. Be silent, embrace it, look forward to the next life. That's where your joy will come. Wow. In a theology that was advocated for so many centuries by the Vatican. A cruel theology. But the poor know better. today. They're more educated. They know that they are called to the table as equals. Our loving God created everyone of equal worth and dignity. No one at that table can say they are better or superior to the other. And it was in that liberation theology that I was taught that all-important word, solidaridad, solidarity. Not complicated. Simply means to accompany others in their struggle, to make their struggle your struggle for peace and justice and equality. Solidarity, as we know, to live that out has consequences. Many were killed in Bolivia and Chile, El Salvador, for living out that word, solidaridad. In my 5th year, I was among the many arrested. Lucky, I had a passport, U.S. passport. Was kicked out. So many were imprisoned, tortured, killed. I came home. It was a hard time. My life had meaning in Bolivia. Tried to get back, denied a visa. And then for many of us, our attention turned to El Salvador. Little country, 5 million people. Archbishop Oscar Romero had just been assassinated, killed in this church while saying Mass. Why? He was talking about solidarity. He was a great lover of the poor. He said, let those who have a voice, which he did, of course, use your voice for the voiceless. Wow. If every church leader, every bishop could live that out. But so many of our church leaders have become corporate executives. Our shepherds have become government sheep. And Bishop Romero was that prophet, that model. And he continues today to be that model. When we went to El Salvador, we found once again our country deeply involved, giving guns and training to those doing the killing. I've never seen anything like El Salvador. It was the slaughter of the innocents. I felt more fear in El Salvador than Vietnam. I've never seen such abuse of power, such brutality of a military toward their people. And it angered me to see my country there, participating in that slaughter. When I came home, like many, we could not shut up. And when 525 Salvadoran soldiers came to Fort Benning, Georgia to start training in combat, a small group of us went there to say, not in our name. We went near the barracks of the Salvadoran soldiers on that post. We had with us the last sermon of Bishop Romero, the day before he was killed, when he said to the military, stop the killing, lay down your weapons. Disobey your orders from your superiors telling you to kill, and obey a higher law, that law of God that says, thou shalt not kill. We took his words, the words of this prophet, and dressed as high-ranking army officers, were able to get onto the post near the barracks and scaled this tall pine tree and waited. And when the last lights went out, we just said, Bishop Romero, this is for you, brother. His voice boomed into the barracks. For us, it was a very sacred moment. The Army didn't quite see it that way. We were arrested, brought to jail, to trial, sent to prison for 1.5 years. No regrets, no regrets. Our lives had meaning in prison, and to be very honest, it was one of the best retreats I've ever been on. Our lives had joy, the three of us who did this. We simply knew why we were there. It was all about solidarity. We got out of prison, went back to work, but we couldn't stop the bloodshed in El Salvador. It increased to $1 million a day, our aid there, and the bloodshed increased. The money going there was all from our tax money. What was going on there was done in our name. And then they went after the Jesuits, very influential group, as we know. I was just at their university in Santa Clara a couple months ago. They have 27 universities in the U.S. and others around the world, like in El Salvador. They were upset with the Jesuits because they were speaking out, telling the world what was going on here and what the United States was doing. And after midnight, that November the 16th, 1989, the military entered their campus, dragged out these 6 Jesuit priests, most of them professors, their co-workers, a young mother, Elba, and her teenage daughter, Selena. And they were massacred, killed. This made the front pages of our newspapers. And for the first time, members of Congress, who each year voted for an increase in military aid to El Salvador, they were now angry. They knew the Jesuits, some of them. They sent a congressional task force to investigate. They come back reporting those responsible for this massacre. Those who did the killing were trained at the U.S. Army School of the Americas at Fort Benning, Georgia. That's when I decided it was time to go back to Georgia. Called friends, Charlie Litkey, one of your own from California, Vietnam vet, recipient of the Medal of Honor in our little group of 10. Kathy Kelly, and some of you may know, doing a lot on the Middle East. And a Jesuit priest, 3 Salvadoran students who had to flee their country with death threats. But the 10 of us started to do some research, gathering there at the main gate, participating in a long 35-day water-only fast to try and express our solidarity with the people there. But after the fast, we really had to do that all-important research and began to document what was this school all about. And what it was all about was every year, about 2,000 soldiers were being trained here from 18 countries. And at that time, over 50,000 had been trained there. And they returned to their home countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, Colombia, where most of them are coming from today. And their purpose really is to protect U.S. economic interest. The role of this school has always been to protect U.S. economic interest. At the core of our foreign policy of Latin America in so many countries, it's about exploiting cheap labor and exploiting those countries' vast resources. For that to happen, you need the men with the guns. We knew enough about this school, especially after the United Nations reported that those who killed Bishop Romero, who raped and killed the church women, the thousands of landless farmers, 32 priests in El Salvador along with Bishop Romero, and healthcare workers, labor leaders, as in Colombia. Those doing the killing were trained at this school. We knew what we had to do. We had to gather at the main gate every November. We put the word out, opened up an office in Washington, D.C., began our website, soaw.org, and we had to organize. We had to say not in our name. So we gathered at the main gate, put the word out, to keep alive the memories of the victims, the many killed, to express our love and solidarity with the people of these countries who are being made to suffer because of this school. And while starting with 10, our numbers grew rapidly. The next year, 500 came. and then 1,000, and then 5,000, 10, 20. And it was such a joy to be there and to see in this mass of people, lots of college students, a lot of veterans, parents coming with their children, a lot of nuns, senior citizens, and others, all together, different ages, backgrounds, speaking with one voice, calling for peace, for justice, stop the killing. That Sunday, very solemn, the solemn funeral procession. After many speakers on that Saturday, great musicians, the puppeteers that bring so much joy to the group. It's like this celebration of hope, kindred spirits coming together. Sunday's more solemn. We carry those thousands of white crosses bearing the names of the victims. And their ages, many of them children. And as we process thousands to the main gate, the names are called. And after each name, the thousands, presente. This person is present with us. We keep their memory alive. And we get to the main gate and we put the crosses, their photos on that fence. We turn it into a sacred memorial wall. I'm happy to say that it became our tradition whenever we gathered. There are always those who cross that line to do that nonviolent act of civil disobedience. That was such a part of the civil rights movement and so many other movements. Nonviolent civil disobedience. Gandhi, Dr. King, Dorothy Day, Cesar Chavez. They always taught us about nonviolent resistance and how there's a higher law to follow. And they inspired us to do this. And I'm happy to report that over 300 of our people over the years have gone to prison now. Among them many nuns and students, senior citizens, and others. And it was an honor to be a part of that group a few times. They send us to prison for 6 months when we go onto the post, go over the fence or cut a hole through it. And when they send us to prison, it energizes the movement. What we learned, of course, from the great peacemakers before us, the truth can never be silenced. They send us to prison. We speak from prison. And when old Maximum Bob, the judge who for years sent us to prison for 6 months, when he retired not long ago, I sent him a little card and wished him well in his retirement. I also thanked him for helping our movement grow. Because every time I said, you sent us to prison, and you know very well you have been known as Maximum Bob. Thank you for bringing more people into our movement. There are signs of hope here in the struggle. We continue. We're going to be back in November. Invite you to go to our website, again, soaw.org, and get more information. Many from California have been with us each year. Or do something locally. We have a bill in Congress, H.R. 2989, calling for the school to shut down. The millions, $38 million recently spent on 5 new buildings at this place. Meanwhile, in Georgia, there has been a $300 million budget cut to education. This is a theft. 2 schools recently closed, middle schools right in that area. This is a theft. Every dollar going into this school is a theft from our children in schools right here in Los Angeles, elsewhere, Pasadena. It's a theft from our elderly, from the many going to soup kitchens and in shelters. I'm happy to report that 5 countries have withdrawn from the school after meeting with their presidents. Those countries being Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador, Nicaragua, and it was such a joy to go back to Bolivia and meet with the president there, Evo Morales, and to meet old friends there. It was amazing. We never once thought that we would have the first indigenous president ever in Bolivia's history, President Evo Morales. We're having next month, our first Summit of the Americas. In Latin America, we're bringing together the youth from 15 countries. It's going to be historic. They're coming in from 15 countries throughout Latin America, including a couple of representatives from California, the youth. And good will come from this. Much good will come from this. Let me say it was addressing this injustice of U.S. foreign policy in Latin America that I discovered and met this injustice much closer to home. In my church, as a Catholic priest for many years, I met many devout Catholic women who shared with me their deep faith and their call to the priesthood. And what I heard kept me awake at night. Amazing. In all those years, I cannot ever remember us just talking about really a conversation of why women could not be priests. It was the tradition. Women have different roles, we said. They're equal, but they have different roles. Well, what I was hearing reminded me of my many years in that little town in Louisiana, 12 years of segregated schools. Worshiping in the Catholic Church where the last 5 pews were for the black members. And making God our partner in this sin of sexism, we said it was our tradition. We are separate but equal. So similar to what I was hearing that justified our sexism. And I began to realize no matter how hard we may try to justify discrimination against others, racism, sexism, homophobia, in the end, it is never the way of our loving God, who created everyone of equal worth and dignity. And somewheres along the way, like you, I learned something very important. When there is an injustice, silence is complicity. Silence is the voice of complicity. And I knew what I had to do. I had to break my silence. A turning point, I think, came when I was invited to Rome to speak at a big conference on the School of the Americas before hundreds of nuns and priests there, and well received. Last day, I was invited to speak on Vatican Radio about the School of the Americas. 15-minute interview. And it went very well for about 13 minutes. And I knew the Spirit was moving me. I knew this movement would never present itself again. And I simply said, there will never be justice in the Catholic Church until women can be ordained. And I remember the manager of Vatican Radio coming in very angry and did this, cut me off the air, and started playing this Gregorian chant. It was too late. had gotten out there, and I must say I slept very well that night. Came back, got in a little hot water, but nothing too serious. But really, wherever I spoke now in sermons and talks about the School of the Americas, congregations, people, university students, and others, they got the package deal. They heard about not only this injustice in El Salvador and Latin America, this injustice in the Catholic Church. And then I was invited to participate in the ordination of one of the many women in the Catholic Church who refused to leave the church and say yes to their call. And the words, Galatians 3:28, there is neither male nor female. In Christ you are one. And they and I and many believe that we are one. Why shouldn't they be ordained? And I said yes to one of the women being ordained. And hundreds gathered. It was a joyful ceremony, wishing her well in her ministry in a church where so many churches are closing because of a shortage of priests. The joy that we felt there was not shared by the Vatican. Just a few weeks later, I got this very serious letter from the Vatican saying I had 30 days to recant, or I would be excommunicated, expelled. I went on retreat, could not recant. I simply wrote back and saying what you're asking me would be a lie. I had to say this. I said, you use that word scandal, grave scandal that I'm causing. I said, when Catholics hear the word scandal, they do not think about women being ordained. But I really focused in on the issue of conscience, the sacredness of conscience that we have learned, especially in our faith community, in our churches. It's our lifeline to the divine. And when we follow our conscience, we're at peace. We're connected to the divine. We feel that joy. And when we don't, we're tormented. We don't sleep well at night. And I knew what I had to do. I simply said, I will not recant. And not long ago, that led to the next letter coming from the Vatican, simply stating that I was expelled. And I have to tell you, it was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in life. 40 years as a priest, 46 years, that was most difficult, being in this Marino family, my community, for 46 years. This last year has been, like so many of us have experienced in life, a challenge. Dark nights of the soul. Sorrow, sadness, disappointment, bitterness. But good things are happening as many of us, go through these experiences. Like Nelson Mandela said, when he got out of prison, I drew wisdom from his words. He said, I'm leaving prison after 27 years. If I don't let go of my bitterness, my hatred or anger, I will continue to be imprisoned. I won't be free. And I found much wisdom in that, truth in his words, how anger and sadness and sorrow can keep us imprisoned. And what I began to realize, though, too, is that when we do follow our conscience, there will be consequences often. And some of those consequences are very serious in the case of Bishop Romero, Gandhi, and so many others whose books are not written about them. They follow their conscience and they are killed, imprisoned, tortured, exiled. And I began to realize something very important. What I was experiencing was only a glimpse of what so many people of color, so many women, so many people from our large LGBT community, our gay community, have been experiencing in my church, in other churches, and in society for centuries. And I'm now getting a glimpse of this because of this experience. And I began to realize, wow, this is a blessing, not a curse. This is something that will bring me deeper into the struggle. This is a teachable moment, a moment of grace. How can I be faithful now? And I'm happy to say that my hope is strong. The joy that I lost is coming back. I'm getting those joy attacks again. I'm filled with hope. Why? Because I know, there's so many of you, that any movement that is rooted in love, that is rooted in justice and equality, cannot be stopped. It's not possible. It is of the divine. It is of God. It is of our Creator. It cannot be stopped, no matter how hard we may try. And we go back and look back, on the whole issue of slavery and the abolition of slavery. Many, including in my church and perhaps in your church, tried to stop the abolition of slavery. They failed. There were many who tried to stop the right of women to vote. Cardinals in my church, bishops, priests. They failed. Impossible. And there were many who tried to stop the civil rights movement. And here too, of course, as we know, they failed. It wasn't possible. And I know in my heart, the reason I have so much hope and joy now, I know that in my church there will be women ordained. It cannot be stopped. It's inevitable. And no matter how hard those at the Vatican and men in the Old Boys Club try to stop this, they cannot stop it. It is of God. And I know that there are many who are trying to stop equality that's rooted in one's sexual orientation, who are trying to stop marriage equality, gay marriage. They cannot stop it. And there too, I realize that I want to be a part of that struggle. I have a voice as you do. And I'm asking now, wherever I speak, it's the real package deal. It's not only about racism and sexism, it's about homophobia. And to be very honest, I have a unique responsibility in a sense as a Catholic priest, thou art a priest forever, to confront my church, as many are doing, in its teaching on homosexuality, the most cruel of all of its teachings. To say that homosexuals, I hate to use this word, but it's their word in the traditional teaching, the official teaching, disordered. How dare you? How dare you imply that God made a mistake in life? That the millions and millions of our sisters and brothers who are born, in the LGBT experience, our large gay community, how can you possibly say someone is a mistake, someone is disordered? This is such cruelty. This causes such suffering among teenagers, suicide, people who have been expelled from their homes, fired from their jobs in places like Uganda, long prison sentences for your sexual orientation, and prison sentences for others who don't report them. And lastly, what is moving me to break my silence. Recently, I met parents at a talk I gave in Baltimore. Catholic parents, mother and father, came up to me, longtime Catholics. Their son committed suicide in high school. And they loved him unconditionally, as God did. He was equal worth of everyone. But he couldn't take the bullying. He couldn't take the rejection of society. He couldn't take the hurt caused by the church that he was a member of. And he took his life. And I will always remember the words of his parents, and that's why I'm not going to keep quiet. I want to speak out louder and bolder than ever before now about this injustice in the church, this teaching. Because the parents said that this teaching contributes to the suffering, to the harm, to the death of others. This is serious stuff here. And once again, we are making God, that's the gravest injustice of all. In sexism, racism, and homophobia, we try to make God our partner and discriminating against others. This is the ultimate heresy of it all. It's wrong. And I simply close with the respectful request. If you are not using your voice, if you are not breaking your silence, I know many of you are not. You've been in these struggles of equality for a long time. Thank you. But if you are not, I simply ask that you use your voice, that you express your love, support, and solidarity with others who are being discriminated against because of their race, their gender, and their sexual orientation. In the back, if you have some questions or would like to talk with me personally, I would really welcome that after. We're out of time. But on the back, great peacemaker there, Frank Durrell at the table. We've got a lot of resources for you to bring home that's addressing these issues I'm presenting here. The first one is about the School of the Americas, a great DVD compilation of our video, one of them, School of Assassins, Oscar nomination, narrated by Susan Sarandon, Bring It Home. A great one, of course, Pink Smoke Over the Vatican. I love this one. Take it, send a copy if you know a Catholic priest or a Catholic bishop. I've sent a copy recently to Pope Francis. But this is a great resource to share with others. In this little booklet I just had to produce, My Journey from Silence to Solidarity. It's in the back there. It makes a great little gift, but it helps to spread the word, build a movement. And that great booklet back there, Addicted to War, the whole issue of militarism and war. I want to thank you for what you're doing here in your church, in this parish, your leaders, your participation. I, like so many, are looking for hope. I'm looking for hope. And you're among those who give me hope. Thank you very much, and let's keep moving ahead with joy in our hearts and hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy Bourgeois. Roy will be here. If any of you would like to engage him, please come on down and we'll have him back. Thank you very much.